All right, Mitch, how we doing?
I'm doing fantastic, Garrett. How you doing?
Pretty good, pretty good. It's a Thursday morning, January the 30th, here in Leesburg, Florida. I'm doing great. It's only been a week since we podcasted last, but there's still so much to catch up on.
Yeah, when's the last time we podcasted 2 weeks in a row?
It's been a minute.
Spoiling our fans right here.
Yeah, very spoiled. No, it's been a minute for sure, but a lot has happened in our families, in the sports world, and everything in between. But first, I have a little exercise for you. Not like a physical exercise, but
thank goodness.
Give me a random word, any word, food, a place, a thing, an animal. It doesn't matter. Just give me a random word.
Styrofoam.
Styrofoam. Okay. How many times? I gave you a hint of this yesterday.
Oh yeah.
How many times would someone have to use the word? No. How many times would you have to hear the word styrofoam throughout the course of a day for you to start to get concerned? If, like, for instance, if you're just like in the break room and you're like, I can't find any cups, and someone's like, here, you can use this styrofoam cup. Or then like someone else comes into your office and was like, dude, have you heard of these new styrofoam coolers that are on sale? Like, people just start using the word styrofoam just like randomly. Like at some point there's going to be a threshold where you're like, it's just coincidence. But then there's going to be a threshold where you're like, this is weird. Like, this is a coordinated effort against me. Like, what's that threshold for you?
I'd say by 3 or 4, I would start to pick up, like, I don't feel like I hear styrofoam this much in a day. And then I'd say by 10, I'd be like, there's something specific about this that I'm hearing about it so much. Like,
it would take 10 mentions of the word styrofoam. Okay, so like someone gives you a styrofoam cup, someone tells you about a new styrofoam cooler, you open Instagram and there's like an ad for styrofoam coolers, and then I don't know, Elizabeth's like, they were out of paper plates, so I had to replace them with styrofoam plates for the student ministry room. And
see, by that point, 3 or 4 times, I'm like, man, I'm hearing a lot about styrofoam today, but I'm not that worried.
Carrie comes back from lunch and she's like, Chick-fil-A was out of paper cups. They gave me this styrofoam cup. And like, then you go to like a student presentation in their class and they're giving a presentation on like the dangers of styrofoam to the environment. Like, it would take a lot to get to 10 mentions.
Yeah.
But once you get there, you're definitely concerned at that point.
You're like, why? In one day? I don't
like
know.
Yesterday,
then you start looking for it and you see it more, maybe.
Well, yes, yeah, that's possible, but it's not just like looking for styrofoam.
Well, looking for it in conversation and stuff. But.
True. But yesterday, I don't think anyone used the word styrofoam in a conversation with me. Period. You know what I mean?
Yeah, probably not.
And so I think definitely by 3, I'm probably intrigued. I think I'd be in single digits still. I think I'd be at like 5 or 6, and I'm like, okay, this is weird. Like someone's playing a joke on me. Like someone is sending people my way and be like, all right, you go talk to him about styrofoam in this way, and then 10 minutes later, like, okay, you go talk to him. All right, you text him this picture of a styrofoam cup. Like
the old styrofoam prank.
Like at some point, it's got to be a coordinated effort. But anyways, that's a fun one. Like, you could use that with any. But I think some things like it would have a higher threshold. Like, styrofoam's kind of weird, but like some things like a person, Patrick Mahomes. Like, if someone, it would take a lot right now, I think, for that to become concerning to me, because he's a hot topic of conversation right now with the Super Bowl coming up. You know what I mean? It's like it'd probably take double-digit mentions of Patrick Mahomes before I'm like, okay, someone's pulling my leg here. Because that's a pretty common.
Yeah, he would have to be, and so my styrofoam was 10. I don't know how many times I would have to hear that, because I'm often the one bringing him up. He's a hot topic.
True.
He's about to attempt for a 3-peat, and like there's a lot going on about him, so something like that. Or I don't know if I would get to a point where I'm like, someone's pulling my leg, because also I love football, so I'm like, please pull my leg if it means talk to me about football.
It's like, that'd be the best prank ever.
Yeah, got me.
But there's other like banana. Like, someone's like, I brought a banana in my lunch, or did you try the new banana milkshake at Chick-fil-A? Or like, did you see that guy on the street like dancing in the banana suit for that restaurant? Or like, there's some things where it's like, wait a second, I've heard banana 6 times before noon already. Like, what's going on? So, anyways, that'd be a fun like small group exercise too for our small group leaders, or maybe a mentor meeting exercise.
Yeah,
I feel like they'd get into it, most of them. All right, we've had quite a few things happen in the sports world. We have a Super Bowl matchup since the last time we podcasted. Eagles, Chiefs. How'd you feel about the conference championship games?
I felt I'll try to be humble here, but my friend, my brother, and I all year for the fun of it have like predicted games just to see how many we can get accurately, and I feel like if I had to have guessed, I had a pretty good prediction of how not just the outcomes but how they would go. Like the Commanders beat the Lions. And so everybody was like, dude, they might win the Super Bowl because the Lions, like if you beat them, you can beat anybody. I really felt like with a rookie QB and a team that's had that big turnaround, they showed their potential they can have on their best day, but they also can't have their best day all the time. And so I figured Philadelphia would handle them. And I didn't think it would be impossible for the Commanders to beat them, but I figured Philadelphia would beat them comfortably.
What was the final score?
It was like 55,
What was the score of the Philadelphia
28 or 24 or something.
The Eagles bested the Commanders in the NFC Championship by a score of 55 to 23.
23. I was close.
I thought it was 48-23. They must have scored one more time.
Yeah.
After I turned
Will
it off.
Shipley, the backup running back, got a touchdown just for the heck of it, I guess. They just they rolled them.
How often do teams break 50 in the NFL?
I mean, at most league-wide 2 or 3 times a year, and maybe not even 2 or 3 times a year.
Like, have you seen a game with one team scoring over 50? Well, I guess there's that one game where the Broncos got blown out or whatever, right? Was that this season, the 70-20 game?
That was last year.
The Miami
Dolphins beat them 70-20.
Yeah, like I said, the Dolphins last season. I just feel like over 50 is like super.
It's rare. Like it doesn't happen a lot. Partially because if teams get a big lead, they kind of take the foot off the gas. But then you've got like the Rams-Chiefs game from a few years ago. It was the first time both teams scored over 50. The Rams beat them 54-51.
Wasn't that the Super Bowl?
No, that was a regular season game. And then that's the year. I think that's the year. No, I think that's the year the Patriots beat the Rams in the Super Bowl. That was like 13 to.
It was like a Super Bowl, rematch or something, or a preview.
It was a Super Bowl pre-match, maybe. I think they both had the potential to go to the Super Bowl that year, but I think that's the year the Pats beat the Rams in like the lamest Super Bowl because it was like the lowest scoring ever.
Okay, pause on the Super Bowl. So yesterday we had a friend tell us that
he got this new styrofoam cup.
Yeah, loves styrofoam. It's his favorite. So like I mentioned in a sermon that like Tom Brady's the GOAT. It was just like an opening illustration.
Yeah.
Like word association. Like I say this person, you say something about them, and like, okay, I say Tom Brady. Like if you said he's the GOAT, you're correct, whatever. And he's like, I don't think Tom Brady's the GOAT because he cheated. And I've been thinking about that ever since he said it.
Okay.
And I don't like cheating, but tell me, like remind me I haven't looked it up because I'm not that dedicated to this. And I also feel like you could rattle it all off anyways. So I've been waiting to ask you.
Oh, I can't. I've been waiting for you to ask.
Remind me the Deflategate scandal and how it all went down.
So when it all came out, the Patriots beat the Colts in the AFC Championship game. They smoked them. Like
right.
It was a beatdown. And then afterwards, some reports came out that the balls that the Patriots were using had less air in them than the balls the Colts had. And so there became this big investigation. And I'll try to constrain myself here because I could say a lot. But I have to say, I'm a Patriots fan, but I hate cheating. And at the moment, I wasn't like, they didn't do it. People just hate their success. Like, I'm like, dude, I'm really mad if they actually cheated. Like, in 2007, they had the whole, or whenever it was, they had the whole Spygate thing where they're accused of filming teams when they weren't supposed to or from angles they weren't supposed to or whatever. So it's not the first time Belichick
like Michigan
has had like controversy and like the decisions he's made. But like false reports came out about this that were proven false and never were really corrected. And so people still believe lies about it. Like the Colts linebacker intercepted Tom Brady in the first half. And the first report was that the Colts linebacker intercepted the ball and then took it to their team trainer because he's like, hey, this ball has like less air than it should. And it's like, oh my gosh, a linebacker hardly ever touches the ball. So if he notices, like it's got to be significant. And he came out and he was like, No, it was my first playoff interception. I wanted to keep the ball because I was happy. And then they took it and did all this other stuff. So things like that happened that made the situation look worse, that were lies that were never really corrected or apologized for.
So did they cheat or not?
To be honest, I don't really know. There was a league-wide investigation into it. There was some sketchy things about the trainer going into the locker room with the balls and coming out, and they were timing it. Like, well, if he was taking air out of the ball, he was in there for 2.5 minutes, and so if he did 20 seconds per 11 balls, like there was a lot going into that. There was a lot that went into the idea that if you're in a warm locker room and then you come out to a cold stadium, like we know just scientifically cold air temperatures take air out of tires and balls and things like that.
You know some things about flat tires?
Yes, I do.
I had a flat tire since
31 years old.
Recorded.
I changed my first tire the other day.
Nice.
Because I had a couple handheld air compressors.
So if he, sorry, mine died. So if the organization, it had to have been a coordinated effort, I would think. Right? Like, it's not like just a couple people on the team knew about it.
And so there was some really strange things about it, like Tom Brady, there were some text messages between Tom Brady and some of the personnel with the team that they think coordinated together to take the air out of them. And the deal is the NFL footballs have to be like somewhere between, I think, 11.5 and 13.5 PSI or something, or maybe it's 12.5 and 13.5. And there were also false reports about the PSI of the footballs. Like, I think each team has like 11 or 12 game balls that they use when they're on the field. The initial report was that 11 of their 12 footballs were significantly underinflated, and so there obviously was something going on. But then it came out that like one was significantly underinflated, and the rest of them were just a little bit underinflated, which could have had to do with the temperature drop. But Tom Brady destroyed his phone at one point, which makes it really sketchy. But apparently he said he always does that when he gets a new phone because he has a lot of personal information on his stuff. They were just so awkward in their media conversations about it.
So let's pretend they did cheat for the sake of this argument. How long had it been going on? Was it just for that one game?
No, I think the accusation was that it was that season.
Okay.
And I don't know if it was much before that season. And I do, for the sake of the case to be made that they did cheat, I think the Patriots like fumbled the ball less than anybody that year, which if there's less air in their balls and it means you can hold on to it tighter, that might be showing something. But here's two things that I will say that don't forget that I hate cheating. If they cheated, whether or not it helped them win, I hate that they cheated if they did. And
well, I'm kind of driving toward like, I don't think it should hurt his GOAT legacy, but right. I'll get there in a second.
So even if they did, which they shouldn't have done it, this investigation started happening like mid-game, like halftime at the Colts game. And so what we know for sure is that in the second half of the game against the Colts, it was close in the first half when apparently they were using intentionally underinflated balls. In the second half, they just they took the game, whooped the Colts, went to the Super Bowl, and so even if there was intentional underinflating, they played better with the balls that were properly inflated, and then there's no possible way that anything like that was going to happen during the Super Bowl when all these conversations were going to happen. So they won the Super Bowl fair and square. They played better against the Colts with their presumed properly inflated balls. And so even if they did it, I don't know how much evidence there is that it was much of a benefit. I think if they did it, they're just idiots and they have an advantage, but they want an extra advantage anyways.
That's kind of where that's what I thought it was. And I remember the game now, where the Patriots blew out the Colts. Like, what was the final score of that game?
It was, probably 40-something to 20-something.
Because it wasn't like they won 22-21 and they had underinflated balls. Like, they blew them out. And I didn't actually know the part about the halftime investigation. That, I think, strengthens my case. Like, cheating, bad, don't do it. But I think there's can we say that can we say there's degrees of cheating? Like, is that allowed? Like, it's
technically,
like it's not like it's not like I'm trying to think of some other types of cheating.
the Falcons, after that had happened, which also it helps that the people. It's kind of like we did apologetics this month in student ministry, and there's a lot of arguments against the existence of God and the reliability of the Bible and the resurrection. But it's not good arguments. It's just people wanting something to be true about something that they want to prove wrong. And so the Patriots were a great franchise for 20 years. And so any sign of doing something wrong, everybody just jumps on it, assumes that it's true, and assumes that that's the only reason they were good. Because Aaron Rodgers had spoken before about how he likes to try to overinflate the ball because he likes the grip of it or whatever. And somebody had quoted him, and this was before Deflategate. Nobody batted an eye. They quoted Rodgers and saying that he would put more air in it, and he would get mad when the refs would take it back down because he likes the tighter, overinflated ball.
He seems like an overinflator.
Nobody cared. Yeah.
Weirdo.
The Falcons, the organization was fined because at their home games they were pumping fake crowd noise into their speakers to benefit their team and to be louder for the opposing team. But they were a bad team at the time, so nobody cared that they cheated. That didn't really help them. And so whether it's ethical or not, people definitely have bias on the degrees of cheating and who's doing it.
Well, I think so. I don't like that he cheated, and I hadn't actually. This is why I thought about it so much since Kevin said it. Like, I hadn't thought about like he cheated, thus he is disqualified from being the GOAT, no matter how great he was. And I was like, I've never like I knew he cheated. I've always called him the GOAT. I never like allowed the two to cancel each other out, but. Like, they blew out the Colts. They won the Super Bowl fair and square. So obviously, like, I would say that cheating didn't really impact the game as much as people might say it could. But let's pretend, like, take away that entire season and take away that entire Super Bowl. If the cheating, the supposed cheating, alleged cheating, was confined to that one season. What season was that?
That was the 2014.
Has it been that long? Wow.
Yeah, 10 years.
Gosh, I'm old. So let's take away the 2014 season. Completely take away that Super Bowl. So now he's only got 6 rings. Is he still the GOAT? Like, even if you remove that season, probably, right?
Oh yeah, definitely.
So I don't know. Like, I think
it's just the strict standard that if you cheat at all, you should be disqualified. And because then it's like, what are you cheating in other ways that we don't know?
Well, yes. Yeah, Kevin compared him to Barry Bonds, which I don't think is a fair comparison.
Using steroids to hit a bunch of home runs?
Yeah, I don't think that's a fair comparison. But I just never thought about it, so I've been thinking about it ever since. And I think I would like to acknowledge the cheating for sure, or alleged cheating, whatever. But I think I'd still like to call him the GOAT.
Yeah.
I don't think that's going to change.
2 more things, and we can move on. About just the way the league poorly handled the entire thing. One, it's significant the things I said. They lied about the linebacker, saying that he intercepted it and noticed it was underinflated. That was a lie. They said 11 of the 12 Patriots balls were significantly underinflated. That was not true. Only one of them were, and the rest were just a little bit under the 11.5 or 12.5. 2 more things is that the league was tipped off about this before that game. And so they did a sting operation. Instead of before the game making sure it was being played fair, they waited until halfway through the game and tried to catch him in the act, which is just dumb because it's like, okay, let's let them cheat for half of a game and catch them instead of trying to prevent it from happening at all. And then because of all of this, the 2015 season, they did a year-long investigation into all kinds of climates and all the teams and their footballs and how the temperature could have affected the inflation and the PSI of the ball. Like, they did a full investigation for a year on footballs and how they adjust to the temperatures. And then they just threw out all the findings and never really publicly said what they found with it.
Huh.
So they did a whole thing to work on finding it out. I don't know if that doesn't necessarily mean they didn't get the answers they wanted, but apparently it wasn't significant enough for them to report what their findings were. And so that's kind of silly.
Have you watched, it's quite raunchy, but the Tom Brady roast?
No.
I have not sat down and watched the entire thing. I've seen clips of it that pop up on my social media, and what I've seen is pretty raunchy, but The
I'm a big
clip,
fan of the roast. I've seen some, but
they can be funny. Like I've actually seen like a roast of a senior pastor one time. It was pretty classy. Like it was pretty funny. Like it can be done well. You also have to have the right person being roasted.
Right.
Anyways, the part that applies to this is Tom, when he got a turn on the mic, he said like he was brought up to Deflategate, whatever, and something about $20 million. Was he fined $20 million, or the league spent $20 million on the investigation?
I think they spent.
I think it was they spent that much, and he's like, you know what y'all could have done? You could have just paid me $20 million, and I would have told you I did it. And everyone's going crazy, and I can't decide. I think you and I talked about this. I can't decide if that was an admission of guilt, or if he's just saying like, $20 million is worth it to me to like say I did it even though I didn't. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think it's in between. It's a roast, so it's a setting of just like dumb humor, and so he probably was just trying to get attention to that. And again, maybe I'm a biased Patriots fan that doesn't want to believe he admitted that, but at this point, I don't really care. Well, I do care if they did that, but I don't have too much invested in, like, at the time, I was, early 20s and cared way too much about football, and I was like very distraught. Like, did we cheat? Like, I can't sleep. Like, what happened?
I can't sleep. Oh, no. I'll sleep fine.
I cared too much about it.
Well, I say that I lost sleep the other night when the Magic lost to the Heat. I have to admit it. So, okay, I have a similar care for my team, the Orlando Magic. Double overtime loss.
Ooh,
all right.
One more thing about cheating.
Okay.
Don't do it. No.
Yeah.
Well, actually, yeah. But Jerry Rice, legendary, like maybe the greatest player ever, greatest wide receiver of all time, has all the possible records and like some pretty untouchable records with how many catches and yards that he had. He, in an interview, he was kind of chuckling as he said it, but I don't think there's any benefit for him to be lying about this. But he admitted that, just kind of casually, passively admitted that he would use stickum on his gloves sometimes, which was, there was a time where it was legal. Guys would literally cover themselves, their helmet, their jerseys, their shoes, head to toe in this pine tar so they could catch the ball better. These guys are getting interceptions, and the ball's just sticking in their jersey. So they clearly realized, okay, this is an unfair advantage. They made it illegal. But he admitted, he's like, yeah, sometimes I spray a little stickum on my gloves. And I'm like, wait, the GOAT of wide receivers is admitting all these catches he had were benefited by an illegal sticky substance.
Yep.
Nobody cared. Nobody said anything about it.
Yep.
But it's just interesting.
Crazy times.
Yeah.
All right.
One more thing.
No. No more. Zero more things.
Not to ask me questions like this on the podcast.
I was genuinely interested. I don't really like to talk about things that don't interest me, and I was interested.
That's fair.
All right. One word answer. Chiefs or Eagles?
Chiefs.
Same. All right. Moving along.
2 words for you. Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts.
That's
must-see TV.
Such a good clip. Steve Nash, Chris Paul, must-see TV. And they're like, that's 9 words. He's like, you didn't say 2 words. Like, you said 2 words. He's like, all right, I'll try again. Nash versus Paul. Like, that's 3 words. Oh, that's
His
great.
face when they said that.
My gosh.
He's like, oh, man.
You should have seen, there's so many viral Barkley clips of him on TNT. And just the other night, they were announcing the All-Star starters. They haven't announced the All-Star benches yet, but they announced the starters. And they must have done this on purpose. They gave him Giannis, the card to open that said Giannis, and he was like, Giannis Antetokounmpo. He just like totally like, I have to find the clip, like totally butchered it. It's Antetokounmpo. Like, it's not that hard.
Yeah.
It's unique, but it's not that hard, but he just totally botched it. It cracked me up, man. Antetokounmpo or something dumb. Anyways, all right. I would like to talk today in the area of ministry, that is, about the pressure, I think is probably the word I would describe, the unique pressure of pastoral ministry. Now, what I'm not talking about, I think, is oftentimes pastors feel pressure to grow numerically, like they feel numeric pressure, like organizational growth pressure. I think that exists in some organizations for sure, but that's not the kind of pressure I want to talk about. I think there's a unique spiritual pressure that pastors experience in ministry that is just unique to ministry. And so I have a verse I want to look at. I have some other thoughts on it. It's just kind of it's kind of a working thought. It's a half-baked thought, but I'm just kind of thinking about this over the past few days and weeks. And I think one foundational idea is this that we've talked about before, and that is that student pastors are pastors. So
Yeah.
we've talked before about like people asking us like, "Do you want to be a pastor one day?" And I'm like, I am right now. Like I'm already doing it. I had someone ask me that just a couple weeks ago, and they are a pastor, and they said, "Do you want to be a pastor one day?" I'm like, "What are you talking about? Like you of all people should know. I'm already a pastor." Anyway, I think that's a foundational piece of this. Like even as youth pastors or student pastors, like the pressure that we feel is not just placing the dominoes order on time and making sure we have enough dodgeballs. Like we feel the real pressure of pastoral ministry as we work with our volunteers and our middle schoolers and high schoolers and college kids and their parents and their siblings. Like we feel the real pressures of pastoral ministry that real pastors feel because we are real pastors. There's a few things I want to throw out there, but do you have any beginning thoughts on that? Just the idea that we are pastors.
That just affirming what you're saying. That is always good to clarify, because I guess people just think of pastor as like they think of a senior pastor or like a campus pastor or something, and so they probably don't mean it exactly how it sounds, but it's still important to say things the right way and not just to say something and mean something else. And so like I know you're like a youth pastor, but like basically they're saying, do you want to be a senior pastor
Right,
one day?
yeah, I know what they mean.
But yeah, it is still, and it's not like our feelings are super hurt and like we don't feel like pastors anymore. But it's important to clearly say what you mean if you're talking to somebody.
I think we are, like I think we're both ordained. Like we have the credential, so to speak, of being a pastor. But there's a lot of ordained men that are not practicing pastors, and so I think we are both ordained and practicing pastoral ministry, which I think the latter is probably more important because in terms of like you don't feel the pressure of being a pastor because you have a certificate on your wall. You feel the pressure of pastoral ministry when you're practicing pastoral ministry. So I think the latter is probably more important for this conversation. Anyways, I have a verse. So the verse is 2 Corinthians 11:28, and it says this, if I could find it. I just had it. Stand by. Yes. It says, "And apart from these things, there is the daily pressure on me from my anxiety for the churches." This is the ESV, uses anxiety. So apart from these things, or apart from other things, there is the daily pressure on me from my concern for the churches, some other versions say. Any initial thoughts after hearing that verse on what maybe Paul is saying or talking about or trying to express with that verse? I haven't done like a deep dive. I haven't watched any sermons on this verse. I haven't read any commentaries. I'm just kind of thinking about it a lot recently. Any thoughts from you?
First thought for me is just that having read all of Paul's letters in the New Testament, like he clearly just cares about the life of the people of the church and that they are like honoring God the right way and being taught the right things. And so just through the things he addresses in his letters, he cares about the fact that the people believe truth and are not like deceived by lies. Like we just preached on the resurrection last night in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, and Paul is like clearly addressing that there's conversation among the people in Corinth at some point about the fact that they think people don't raise from the dead.
Yeah.
And so, and he doesn't necessarily say, like we don't see where that's coming from. We just see him addressing like, hey, if people aren't raised from the dead, Jesus isn't raised from the dead, and here's the implications. And so I know he felt a deep burden for the people in general that they can have like a life that's honoring to God and that they can believe the correct things and practice the right things. And so he cares for people in general.
I think that's a good clarification because, you know, a 21st century American pastor might read this and be like, anxiety for the churches. Well, yeah, I feel anxiety for the churches. Does my church have more people in the pews this Sunday than we did last Sunday? Has giving gone up? Are we baptizing more people? Is our membership, you know what I mean? Like that's some of, kind of back to the original prologue, if you will, like some of the organizational pressure that we feel in the 21st century American church is not necessarily what Paul's talking about here. Paul's not like, I have anxiety for all the churches I planted. Like, are they all bigger than when I planted them? Are they, you know what I mean? He has concern for what you just expressed. Like, are they believing truth? Are they ridding sin from their life? Are they loving their spouse? Are they raising their kid? Like, he has concern for that. And so I think that's clarifying. It's just interesting because I've expressed this. Where do I want to go? I have a couple thoughts. Okay, so I'll start here. So I guess one thought I have on this is like, I think pastoral ministry is very unique. I don't think you have to convince anyone of that. I'm curious what you think about this. I don't necessarily think pastoral ministry is a higher calling. I just think it's a different calling. Kind of the biblical idea of like a royal priesthood. Like, it's not like pastors are doing spiritual work and then everybody else, the doctor, the lawyer, the plumber, the teacher, they're doing secular work. Like, no, it's a royal priesthood. We're all doing spiritual work. We just happen to work for the church. And I do think working for the church and running the church and keeping the church afloat has its own unique pressures that we'll talk about in a minute, but I don't think it's a higher calling per se or a more spiritual calling. But I do think it's a unique one. I think other people, other Christians, members of our church that are in other industries are still doing God's will and are still doing spiritual things, just expressing that in a different way. Does that make sense? Or you push back on that?
That does. I don't have the verse on hand. We could probably easily find it, but there is a need to like interpret things well on that conversation, because Paul does talk about pastors being held to a higher standard. And so he's just that, maybe that's descriptive, and he's just saying if you're a pastor, that doesn't mean if you're a lay person you should be a good Christian, but if you're a pastor, that's a higher calling to be more spiritual. Like, everybody needs to rid sin from their life and follow Jesus as closely as they can. But he describes maybe effectively, because pastors are so much more like scrutinized and more closely looked at in their lives, like in a sense there's a higher calling. Like, if you're accepting the role as a pastor, you're even more public, so you need to be more accountable and more strict with like your spiritual disciplines. And so it's addressed in the Bible in a certain way, but it might just be descriptive. Like, that doesn't mean, because like that doesn't mean you should flip that around and tell the layperson like, you're not a pastor, so there's a limit to how closely you should follow Jesus and how strict your spiritual discipline should be.
Right.
But there's at least an acknowledgement that people are going to hold you to a higher standard, and so you need to live up to that standard so you can represent God well. So I don't really know what the conclusion is on that, I guess.
No, that's a great point, because I think even though like I think I would stand by, like, it's not a higher calling, it's just a different calling. But even though it's not a higher calling, you do have a higher standard, which I think you can differentiate between the two. But like First Timothy, we were in 1 Corinthians last night. 1 Timothy chapter 3 is one of the places, probably the primary place where you find the qualifications for a pastor. And one of my mentors always says, like, yeah, these are the qualifications for a pastor, but these are also things that all Christians should be aiming for anyways.
Yeah.
The pastor just needs to already have accomplished them and be maintaining them. So like a husband of one wife, hospitable, able to teach, not drunk. Like, he's like, yeah, a pastor should be checking all those marks before they are practicing pastoral ministry, and maintain those check marks as they're practicing pastoral ministry. But those are also things that just all Christians should be aiming for anyways. And so I don't think it's necessarily like a higher calling. I guess what I'm trying to avoid is like, I'm not better than you, layperson, because I'm a pastor. I'm just a pastor.
Right.
Like, I'm a sheep as well as a shepherd, in many ways. And so it's not a higher calling. It's not a more important calling. It's not a more valuable calling. It's a calling. It's a different calling. But I guess in the midst of that unique calling, there is still a higher standard. I think that's a fair point. So, But I guess what I'm trying to avoid as we move forward in this conversation is like, I don't think, I think some denominations might, whether they say it outright or not, I think some denominations might put pastors on a pedestal and think of them and view them as better than the member. I just, as a Baptist, I wouldn't view that way. Like I wouldn't view pastors that way.
There is both sides of it. Like, you don't want the pastor to be puffed up and start to feel better than the people that he's preaching to. And you don't want the layperson to either think too much of the pastor, and also you don't want them to allow that to be any excuse for them. Like, man, like, he's living so great. Like, if I was a pastor, I would be living that great. Like, no,
right.
You should you should be looking at Jesus and not the pastor, and like try to live great regardless.
And well, I think I think the member can view the pastor as authoritative and maintain a healthy respect for the pastor and all that stuff, but also without viewing them as like more than just a mere human. Like the pastor, as another friend in ministry says, like, pastors have like real faith with Jesus. It's not like a special faith with Jesus. We have real marriages. We got real kids. We got real jobs. Like, we got real bodies that we have to keep healthy. Like, he's like, we have all the same stuff you guys have, you guys being the members. Like, we just happen to be pastors. And so, if one of my kids goes astray, I have real kids, If I have a marriage issue, I have a real marriage. If I have, it's just.
Yeah, pastor's a real person, not like the fourth person of the Trinity.
Oh, throwback. Oh my, what a mess. So anyway, I guess that's a foundational piece to this conversation, is like, I have some thoughts on the pressures of pastoral ministry, but I don't think it's rooted in this being like more valuable or important than what the plumber's doing that happens to be a Christian, But here's the thing I've been talking with some others about is like, I think there's a spiritual weight to pastoral ministry that just doesn't exist in any other industry. And so, like, I think a pastor has to develop his skills and maintain his skills, and has to have discipline, and has to have grit, and has to manage people well and manage relationships well. Like, I think there's a lot of that goes on that's similar to, say, running a business, for instance, or running a practice, law practice or doctoral practice, whatever. But at the end of the day, no other industry feels the weight of the eternal trajectory of their clients, if you will. Like, you don't feel that weight like we do. And when it comes to their belief or rejection of the truth that weighs heavy, or the sin that they won't get rid of their life, like won't rid from their lives, that weighs heavy, or just the broken marriage. Like, if you're selling someone a car, you don't care if their marriage is broken, but I'm not selling cars, their marriage matters to me. And so, like, there's just a weight that comes along with pastoral ministry that just doesn't exist in any other industry, I think.
Yeah. I've always said it's a dangerous calling.
Hey, good book. We should write a book. Thoughts on that little riff?
That's a good point. Like, people, even pastors, are sinful people and definitely can do things wrong and have the wrong motivations. And so some might care so much about numbers and just the function of the church behind the scenes that they do, that they lose track of, like, there's real people in the congregation, and you should care about their marriages and their families and stuff. And so, unfortunately, it can be done wrong, but that is ultimately what we're doing. Is I like the metaphor you use. Like, there's the eternal clients, or the clients of the church, we focus on their eternity and care a lot more about their well-being. And so there can be a weight that you feel from being the one who, like, needs to shepherd people with, like, difficult troubles. You want to care about them, and you want to care for them well.
Yes, I do care about numbers. Like I track numbers very closely, and I care about attendance. I care about finances. I care about a lot of those things. But at the end of the day, I don't really lose sleep over those things. Like I trust the sovereignty of God, and if I do my job well and I'm faithful, He'll be faithful. And the Holy Spirit's like the wind; He blows wherever He wishes. So like I'm tracking it, but I'm not losing sleep over it. But I would lose sleep over like the spiritual burdens of like a wayward child, broken marriages, deep rooted sin, abuse, just on down the line. Like that's the stuff that like just gets funneled to you as a pastor, and you just have this long mental list of like this person's dealing with this, and this person with this, and this person with this, and this person with this, and you just know things about a large group of people that nobody else knows, and you're carrying that weight along with them. And I think that like just weighs heavy. And so that's where this verse, back to the verse, 2 Corinthians 11:28, Paul says, essentially like, in addition to all these things, I feel the daily pressure of my anxiety for the churches. And before this verse, he's talking about how he has to feed himself and find water to drink and find shelter and look out for his own safety. Like he's talking about how like he has to do all the things that any other normal person has to do. But he's like, in addition to all that, I feel daily pressure that no one else feels as a pastor. And I think that's true of pastors today. Like we have to do the same stuff that everyone else has to do. Like I got to pay my mortgage. I got to buy groceries. I got to feed my kids. I got to love my wife. Like, I got to exercise. Like I got to do the same stuff that anyone, like any normal quote unquote person has to do. But 2 Corinthians 11:28, in addition to all that, I also feel the daily pressure of concern for the spiritual health of the people that God has entrusted to me. So thoughts there?
That's good. I feel that especially as I've gotten more involved in student ministry and in college ministry, and the last 2 weeks, last week and last night, like while everybody was playing basketball and volleyball, like I was aside with a student, like just having some heartfelt conversation about the struggle that they're going through, and like I feel it, and I feel like I don't naturally feel deep sympathy or empathy for people, but the more I just do ministry and care for the people that I'm shepherding and see like the hurt they're going through, like the more I want to learn how I can help them better, because I don't always have the right answers, and maybe that's part of the burden too, like you want to say the right things, and sometimes you just don't want to say anything if you don't have anything like really helpful to say, but it's an added burden just to be there and to embrace somebody's burdens along with them.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, similar, not in the same way, but similar to numbers, like I need to be faithful and do the next right thing, and then entrust the results to the Lord. Like, so like if I'm putting on an event or just weekly ministry stuff, like I just do my very best to put on something quality, invite people, promote it, communicate, blah, blah, blah. Whoever shows up, shows up. Now, God's blessing our ministry. We're growing numerically, all that good stuff. But it's similar with like spiritual things. Not that those events are unspiritual, but like with the conversation you're just talking about, like you might say all the right things. You might be faithful to prepare for those conversations whenever they come. One comes your way, you say all the right stuff, and then they still go do the wrong thing. Like if you're counseling someone in their marriage and you say all the right stuff and they still go get divorced, or like you're counseling someone on how to parent their kid and you say all the right stuff and the kid still walks away from Jesus, or you're counseling someone on like how to rid sin from their life, this specific sin, you say all the right stuff and they still go do the thing. I think that's a harder one to like just brush off, because it's like if I prep for this event or I prep for this weekly gathering and I do all I can do and I do everything right and not as many people showed up as I thought, well, oh well, on to the next one. But if it's like if it's a serious conversation with someone like the one you were just talking about, and you say all the right stuff, and you're like, man, I just crushed it, and then they still go screw up or whatever. I don't know. That's a harder one to brush off.
Yeah.
Even though that's still in the hands of the Lord and in the hands of the Holy Spirit to convict and guide and take over. You're just an instrument. It's a harder one to brush off.
And I think part of that burden is that it's hard to 100% lean into the truth that like God is doing the work in their hearts, because you can feel great about your delivery and then they mess up and you're like, well, I know I can't control them, but like, could I have been more persuasive?
Right.
The comparison thing. Like I know this other guy that's really good at convincing people to change their habits. And so like, how equipped am I for this? Did I say the right things? And so you've got to, part of the burden is like trying to deflect those lies and not let you be lazy and like not put effort into helping somebody. But there has to be that balance of knowing like you can't force somebody to change, and God will allow them sometimes to not change if they're not listening to Him.
Yeah, another way I've been thinking about it is like weightlifting, like physical weightlifting this time. Like you do any type of exercise, you should have a purpose behind it. Like if you're running, you should be running for, I'm trying to lose weight, or I'm practicing for this, or I'm prepping for this race or whatever. If I'm weightlifting, I'm trying to get to this level of strength or this body fat percentage, or I'm practicing for this competition or whatever I'm doing. And so like weightlifting, as a dad of like 3 children, I'm not competing in any competition. It's just not what that's not why I'm doing it. But like I am trying to be able to like, I want to be able to like play with my kids without getting injured and like throw them up in the air and like move heavy things around the house whenever I need to. And the purpose for my exercise, I guess, would be I'm trying to be able to carry, you're seeing where I'm going with this. I'm trying to be able to carry the weight of my household, and physically, that is. And I've been thinking about that a little bit when it comes to 2 Corinthians 11:28. Like, you're going to have some weight as a pastor that you have to carry, and have you been working out, so to speak, spiritually enough so that when it's time to come pick up that weight, you can lift it? I don't know. Like, I think so. But, like, I think that's back to where it's a higher standard. It's a higher standard because you've got to be strong enough so that when someone dumps something on you, you can hold it, you can lift it, you can carry it. And of course, there's always Matthew 11, like Jesus is carrying it, his burden is light, that whole thing. But I think Jesus is working through you as a pastor, and you've got to be spiritually strong enough and maintain spiritual strength to where you can have some anxiety and some concern for the churches and lift and carry the weight of their burdens. I don't know. I don't know if it's a weird analogy or not.
What is that? 1 Timothy 4:12 or something like that. Physical training is of some use, but spiritual training is like much more valuable.
Yeah, it is. Exercise is healthy, but spiritual training is more valuable, and I think that's especially applicable to. I hadn't thought about that with this 2 Corinthians 11:28, but I think that verse is especially applicable to this for pastors because, like, you might carry some spiritual weight or some physical weight rather if you move the pulpit from here, or if you're like pulling off a camp, like you need to be physically in shape. But ultimately, you've got to be spiritually in shape because the church is counting on you to carry some weight. And, anyways, I don't know. Maybe that's
1 Timothy 4:12 is the let no one despise you for your youth. That's a good verse too. It's in one of the Timothys.
I think it's 1 Timothy 4:8.
So close.
But maybe that's a broken, illustration. Maybe that's a broken analogy, because I don't know. I'm just still, again, this is kind of a half-baked idea. Still kind of thinking through it all. But, anyways, I think the reason I wanted to talk about this is because I just like talking about things that interest me. I mentioned that already. It's top of mind recently as we're in a new year. I think there's some seasons where people like to pile stuff on you in a concentrated amount of time. Like the past couple weeks, I've been like, another one? Like, come on, man. But you should just expect it, I guess. Like this kind of happened in like August, September, like the beginning of a school year, beginning of a calendar year. I think there's just seasons where stuff comes to light and then they need the pastor's insight. And this is one of those seasons, I suppose. But also, I bet there's a bunch of people listening, student pastors, youth pastors listening, who feel similarly. And so just wanted to talk out loud with you and think out loud with you, give you a verse, 2 Corinthians 11:28, and tell you that you're not alone. 2,000 years ago, Paul felt this way. Here in Leesburg, we feel this way. We feel the weight of it all. It's rewarding though. Like the weight is heavier than any other industry, if you will. But I would say the reward is greater than any other industry if you're willing to carry the weight. But it's normal. People feel it. You're not doing it alone. And those are just kind of my running thoughts, my half-baked thoughts on the idea that pastoral ministry is not necessarily a higher calling, but it is a pretty unique calling with a higher standard that you pointed out. So
I think that's a good way to put it.
Anyways, kind of a unique, we're not talking about how to, run a large group youth ministry game today. Kind of a sobering conversation, but just something that's been on my mind. So any closing thoughts on, I don't know what I'll title this episode. Daily pressure, maybe? Just right out of the verse. Something
Styrofoam.
Like that. Styrofoam. That's even better.
Patrick Styrofoam Holmes.
Daily styrofoam. Any closing thoughts on that?
Just to echo your encouragement, like, it's not always going to be easy, and so don't give up. Like, there's going to be some days and maybe some seasons where you feel unequipped, but just some cliches, but be faithful to the Lord and stay in the Word and just do those daily practices. And we talked recently, and actually with some students yesterday, about leadership and influence and how you don't just get into a certain position and then become equipped. But like, the Christian life in general is about waking up every day and committing to Jesus and having spiritual practices. And so you'll get better and more comfortable with leading people as you do it. And so don't give up when it gets difficult, but just push on.
No, I think that's good. Like, almost kind of going off what you just said, like almost like, don't be surprised when pastoral ministry is hard and weighty. Be surprised when it's not.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, expect it to be, and then when it's not, be like, oh, this is weird. Because I think most of the time it will be pretty weighty if you're doing it right and building some trust, and then people are cashing in that trust by sharing with you a lot of the stuff that's going on in their lives. So be surprised when it's light and easy, because it's not normally going to be.
That's good.
So, all right, this is helpful just to think out loud. Hope some people listening found it helpful. This has been another episode of Effective Student Ministry. This is Garrett.
And this is Mitch.
We'll see you next time. Go Chiefs.
Bye. Yeah. Go Jags.
Oh, boy.
Duval.
Dang it.